Palestinian activist Ahed Tamimi was among the 30 prisoners released on Wednesday. 22-year-old rose to prominence in 2017 when she slapped an Israeli soldier who raided a village in the occupied West Bank. Ms. Tamimi, who was 16 at the time, was sentenced to 8 months in prison. She was arrested again earlier this month on suspicion of inciting violence. Many Palestinians who have been released have alleged that they've been tortured in Israeli jails.
The situation in prison is very hard. Their treatment is unbelievable, and we thank the resistance, who has high spirits, and God willing, the relief from him is near.
Now for the very latest on the war in Gaza, let's cross live to the Israeli city of Tel Aviv and speak with Arise special correspondent Karl Bostic. Karl, it's always great to have you on Newsday. Good afternoon. I'm going to get straight into it as usual. Can you give us more details about the attack in Jerusalem, and why is the nature of this attack significant?
Good afternoon. Well, yes, this attack in West Jerusalem is very, very significant, and it does connect with what's going on in Gaza in a very alarming way. Jerusalem is no stranger to terror attacks, going back to the Second Intifada back in 2001, which I covered myself. Yet this is the first attack in Jerusalem since October 7th. It was morning rush hour. Before 8 o'clock, a white car pulls up to a bus stop at the entrance to Jerusalem, in West Jerusalem. A white car pulls out. Two men get out and begin opening fire on passengers waiting in line to get on the bus. Immediately, people were scrambling to get onto the bus. In the end, 2 people were killed on the site, 5 injured. Another person, a third person, a young woman, she died of her wounds in the hospital. But what's important to note is, where did these gunmen come from? They were residents of East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is predominantly Arab. Those living in East Jerusalem, they actually have ID cards that permit them to travel anywhere in Israel. This is the first time we've seen this since October 7th. With these cards, they can travel without going through checkpoints or being stopped or anything. And these 2 gunmen, it turns out, had served prison time. One of them for 10 years, another for about 10 months. And they both were inspired or members of Hamas as well. They were killed on sight by 2 off-duty Israeli military reservists. One of them, in fact, was on a 12-hour leave. He was on his way back to Gaza. He was at the bus stop waiting to return for duty in Gaza. They both had their weapons with them, and then a civilian who was armed also opened fire on them and killed those 2 as well. What was really, again, striking is the fact that despite a ceasefire in Gaza, you still have the influence of Hamas in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, and this could be portending yet another front. That's what now people are very nervous and jittery about, so much so that Israel's Interior Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, he visited the scene. His party is a coalition member of the government. It's the most extreme party in the government, very, very, very far right and very hard line against Palestinians. And he's the one who has loosened restrictions for Israelis to buy guns, so much so that now you only need to take a 4.5-hour training course to how to use a gun, and you are then allowed to buy a gun on the spot. So now you've got about 250,000 Israelis who've applied to buy guns, and now gun permits are being issued at a rate of 1,700 a day. 1,700 guns being issued to Israelis on a daily basis. And he says that what happened today was proof for why Israelis need to arm themselves.
Indeed, Karl. Now, the ceasefire in Gaza has been extended for 1 more day for today. Is this ceasefire process going to hold, do you think?
Well, there's a lot of speculation right now in Israeli media that it could be on its last legs, because the original term had always called for 10 women and children to be released each day in exchange for Palestinian prisoners at a ratio of 3 to 1. So, for example, 10 names were submitted for today's release, but Israel rejected because those 10 names were not all living people. It was 7 names with 3 bodies, and that was turned down by Israel. It was only accepted The ceasefire was supposed to end at 7 o'clock this morning. They only resolved it at 20 minutes before 7 this morning. And what Hamas did, they submitted an eighth name, but then they kind of back-timed it. For those two hostages released last night who were Russian citizens, but also with Israeli citizenship, Hamas counted those two Russians released as Israeli citizens. So that's why you have today's release. But now it's a numbers game because it's not clear if Hamas can even really deliver, more women and children. It's estimated there's still at least 15 women and children to be released from Gaza. Right now, the Israeli military, they're saying that they are ready to resume military operations in Gaza. So this is really a day-to-day situation now.
Right now, in further developments, the U.S. Secretary of State just arrived in Israel this morning. Do you think he'll be able to make progress in ending this war? I know that is a very huge question to ask you.
Well, as Israel's most important partner militarily and diplomatically, the U.S., they can't tell Israel what to do, but nor can Israel ignore what the U.S. is telling them. And the U.S., for example, they have not called for a permanent ceasefire, but they do support the extension of a humanitarian pause, and that's what we're seeing right now. So he's here to try to extend these humanitarian pauses to allow for a steady flow of humanitarian. You see by those trucks bringing in the food, water, medicine, and also fuel. He wants to see that continue if there's a resumption of hostilities. At the same time, he wants to start looking and planning for the day after the war, what a Gaza will look like without an Israeli presence on the ground. So there'll be a discussion centering around that. But just this morning's attack in Jerusalem is a reminder that it's going to be very, very hard for him to persuade or convince Israel from restraining itself in carrying out its attacks, not only in Gaza, which may begin very soon, as early as tomorrow morning, but also in the West Bank, where you've now got, 2,000 arrests since October 7th, preventive arrests in connection with what's going on with the Gaza war without even being charged.
Indeed, Karl Bostic reporting there live from Tel Aviv. Many thanks for your thoughts on the Gaza situation so far. It's good to have you with us.